Medical History on Brock and Main Street. Introduction. Hello everyone and welcome to the UHC Medical History Walking Tour. During this tour, we'll be exploring the rich medical history of Uxbridge while also looking deep through previous medical practices, advancements, and discoveries throughout history. During this tour, we will be visiting local buildings and businesses on Brock and Main Street and diving into the history behind them. To begin, we'll be starting with Dr. Mellow's house, 38 Main Street. One of the oldest and best preserved framed homes in the town of Uxbridge, this house was built around 1863 by Dr. Joseph Bascom. Dr. Bascom built the house after he graduated from medical school and came to Uxbridge to practice his profession. Originally, it was 1.5 stories and had a gable above the front door. There was also an upper porch above the front entrance as well, which possesses decorative trim. This was typical of the classic revival style of houses that were built between 1830 and 1860, as they were often small, rectangular in shape, and featured medium-pitch gable roofs. Despite the fact that the house had a lot of renovations done, it still maintains a lot of its exterior aesthetic from its original design. Dr. Bascom renovated the house in 1880. During this time, he added a second story and a medical office on the north side of the house. Dr. Bascom was extremely active in the community and was even elected as the town's first mayor in 1885, a position he held for 3 terms. He also served for over 25 years on the Public School Education Board. After the renovations were complete, his nephew, Dr. Horace Bascom, practiced in the house as well and eventually took over Dr. Joseph Bascom, moved to Toronto in 1892. Horace continued to practice at the office for another 20 years before selling the home and business to Dr. Frank A. Mellows of Saintfield. Not long after arriving in town, Dr. Mellows married his sweetheart, Daisy Carmichael, and spent the rest of his life raising his family and practicing medicine. As a result, this house served as a residence and office for local physicians for more than a century. Dr. Mellows was also very active in town affairs throughout the 51 years of living in Uxbridge. He served on the board of Uxbridge Public Library and the public school. He also was a devoted church worker and was given the honor of laying the cornerstone of the United Church Educational Wing when it opened in 1961. Dr. Frank Mellows passed away in April 1963, leaving his wife and 2 children. The Mellow House is still owned and maintained by members of the Mellow family to this day. Our next stop is R.F. Willis Drugstore, 28 Brock Street West, now Cycle Solutions. This store was once known as Willis Drugstore. It was owned and operated by the druggist Rupert Fred Willis, or R.F. Willis as he was known in the community. When he moved to Uxbridge from Stouffville, R.F. Willis bought out Dr. Gould's West End drugstore in the Wheeler Block in 1890. In July of 1891, he moved his drugstore into the H. Bishop store opposite of the post office. R.F. Willis was honored by the Drug Training Company in celebration of his 50th anniversary as a druggist in 1954. In 1955, the Willis family celebrated 3 generations of druggists working in the same store. This included R.F. Willis, his son Byron, or Bun, and his grandson Russell. As a pharmacist for 74 years, R.F. Willis was honored in May of 1957 by the Ontario College of Pharmacy in Peterborough as the oldest living graduate of the college. Our next stop on the tour is the Roxy, 46 Brock Street West. The Roxy Theatre building has been a part of the Uxbridge scene for over 70 years. Although the interior and exterior designs have changed throughout the years, the original Quonset-style building was constructed in 1949 by Douglas Work of Berks Falls, who named it the Rio Theater. In 1951, the Theater Amusement Company purchased it, and the name was changed to Roxy. The theater was closed in the 1970s, and it was converted into a drugstore for about 20 years before being purchased by Kathy and Mark Kristoff in 1996. The Kristoffs renovated the entire building and reopened it as the Roxy Theater with 2 screens. Medical history with barbershops. 8 Church Street, now Details Hair Salon. You've probably seen the classic red, white, and blue barbershop pole as it's become such a recognized part of barbershops. But did you know it actually represented the practice of bloodletting, which was performed in barbershops during the Middle Ages? In 1163, Pope Alexander III ordered monks and priests to stop performing bloodletting, so barbers started offering the service instead. The red represents the blood and white represents the bandages used to stem the bleeding. The blue is symbolic of venous blood. The pole represents the stick the patients would squeeze tightly in order to make the veins in their arms stand out more prominently for the procedure. Since the barbers were involved not only with hair cutting and shaving, but also with surgery, bloodletting, cupping, and leeching, enemas, and the extraction of teeth were called barber surgeons. The split between barbers and surgeons became more prominent near the mid-1700s. In 1743 in France and in 1745 in England, barber surgeons who cut or shaved hair were no longer allowed to perform surgery. The Cottage Hospital, 116 Brock Street West. One of the most ambitious projects undertaken by the community of Uxbridge during the 1950s was the building of a much-needed hospital. By the end of 1951, a site and plans had been approved, but unfortunately, funding issues began immediately. The size of the hospital had been scaled down, and finally, in 1954, construction began with the excavation for the Cottage Hospital. Delays, however, still held back its completion due to the lack of funding that it was receiving. At this point, the community, which was led by its determined hospital board and town fathers, came together and raised the necessary funds. Nearly a decade after the initial planning, the Uxbridge Cottage Hospital finally opened its doors in 1958. Medical breakthroughs and discoveries in the 1950s. With this undertaking of building a hospital taking place in the 1950s, it's interesting to see how many medical breakthroughs and discoveries were achieved throughout the 1950s. The antibiotic penicillin, which is considered one of the most important medications of all time, was successfully synthesized and mass-produced. The first artificial heart valve, which is also known as the caged by, was developed by Dr. Charles Hufnagel in 1952. This represented the first long-term success in prosthetic heart valves, which in turn came to shape modern medical practice and the use and development of artificial organs. The cycle of sleep known as REM sleep was first discovered in 1953 by a graduate student at the University of Chicago named Eugene Aserinsky. James Watson and Francis Crick discovered the 3D double helix structure of DNA in 1953. The polio vaccine was first developed in the early 1950s, and the large-scale use of IPV began in 1954 when it was administered to American schoolchildren. In conclusion, this brings us to the end of the tour. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us today exploring Uxbridge's vast medical history. If you love local history, we would love to have you visit our Uxbridge Historical Center, where we have multiple buildings with plenty of history behind them. Hope to see you soon.